She was just a waitress working the graveyard shift to pay off her father's debts. He was the most feared man in New York, a ghost who ran the city's underworld. They were never supposed to meet. But one night, on a receipt stained with coffee rings, she saw something no one else did, a math error worth $5 million. She ran out into the rain to correct him. That single act of honesty didn't just get her a tip. It put a target on her back and a diamond ring on her finger. But in the world of Dominic Moretti, correcting the boss isn't just dangerous. It's usually fatal. Listen closely, because this story of betrayal, lust, and revenge will leave you breathless. The neon sign of Sal's 24-hour diner buzzed with an irritating hum, a sound Elena Vance had become intimately familiar with over the last 6 months. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in Brooklyn. The rain was hammering against the plate glass windows, turning the city lights into smeared streaks of red and yellow. Inside the diner smelled of stale frying oil, bleach, and hopelessness. Elena adjusted her apron, wincing slightly. Her feet were throbbing. She was 24 years old, with a mind that could calculate compound interest in seconds and a master's degree in forensic accounting, gathering dust in a drawer. Yet here she was, pouring decaf for truck drivers and insomniacs, because her father, God rest his gambling soul, had left her with a debt to a loan shark that made her student loans look like pocket change. "Eleanor, table 4 needs a refill," her manager Rick shouted from the kitchen pass. Rick was a sweaty man who stained his shirts and skimmed off the tip jar when he thought no one was looking. Eleanor grabbed the pot. On it. Table 4 was different tonight. Usually at this hour it was empty. Tonight 4 men sat there. They took up too much space. They wore suits that cost more than the diner itself, charcoal grey Italian cuts, silk ties. The air around them felt heavy, pressurized. 3 of the men were essentially walls of muscle with earpieces. But the man in the center, he was gravitational. He couldn't have been older than 32. He had dark hair, swept back sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. Cold, turbulent, and terrifyingly intelligent. He was reading a folded newspaper, but Elena noticed his hand resting near the inside of his jacket. She approached the table. "Coffee." The man looked up. For a second, the diner went silent. He stared at her, not with lust, but with an intense assessment, as if he were scanning a barcode. "Black," he said. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated in her chest. "Leave the pot." "Sure," Elena said, keeping her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. She placed the pot down. "Anything to eat?" "No," one of the bodyguards grunted. "Just the bill." Elena nodded and walked back to the register. She printed the check. It came to $12.50. When she returned, the man in the center, the dangerous one, was writing on the back of a napkin. He wasn't writing words. He was writing numbers. Columns of them. He looked frustrated. He scribbled something out, wrote a new figure, and then slammed his pen down. He pulled a crisp $100 bill from a silver money clip and tossed it on the table. "Keep the change," he said, standing up. The movement was fluid, like a predator uncoiling. The group moved toward the exit. Elena went to the table to clear it. She picked up the 100. A great tip. It would cover the electric bill this week. Then she looked at the napkin he had left behind. It was a complex equation involving shipping container weights, projected tax tariffs, and a conversion rate from euros to USD. At the bottom, he had double underlined a final figure, $14,500, $200. Elena's brow furrowed. She looked at the column again. It was automatic for her. She saw numbers the way other people saw colors. He forgot to carry the variable tax on the port entry fees, she thought. And he used the exchange rate from yesterday, not the closing rate from today. She did the mental math instantly. The result wasn't 14 million. It was 11 tumults, £200, 500. The difference was over $3 million. If this was just a doodle, it didn't matter. But if this was a business deal, if he was moving money based on this math, someone was stealing from him, or he was about to overpay massively. She looked at the door. They were getting into 2 black SUVs, idling at the curb. "Don't do it, Eleanor," a voice in her head screamed. "These are bad men. Just take the $100 and go home." But Elena Vance had a flaw. She couldn't stand incorrect data. It was an itch she had to scratch. She grabbed the napkin and ran out into the rain. "Hey!" She shouted, the water instantly soaking her uniform. "Hey, wait!" When the rear door of the second SUV was open, the man was 1 foot inside. He stopped and turned. Instantly, 2 of the bodyguards pivoted their hands going to their waistbands. Elena skid to a halt on the wet pavement, holding up the napkin like a white flag. "You did the math wrong," she yelled over the thunder. The man froze. He signaled his men to stand down with a subtle flick of his fingers. He stepped back out of the car, the rain darkening his expensive suit. "Excuse me," he asked, his voice cutting through the storm. Elena shivered, stepping closer. The calculation on the napkin. For the container yield, you used the gross weight, not the net weight after tariff deduction, and your exchange rate is off by 0.4%. The man stared at her. The silence stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds. Rain dripped from his nose. "And," he pressed. "And," Elena stammered, holding the soggy napkin out to him. "The total isn't 14 million. It's 11.2. You're about to lose $3 million. The man took the napkin. He looked at it, then pulled a gold pen from his pocket and did a quick calculation on his palm. His eyes widened just a fraction. A flash of dangerous anger crossed his face, but it wasn't directed at her. He looked back at Elena. He looked at her cheap sneakers, her soaked apron, her name tag. "What's your name?" "Elena," she whispered. "Get in the car, Elena." "What?" "No, I have to work. I just wanted to—" I said. He stepped closer, looming over her, his eyes locking onto hers with a terrifying intensity. "Get in the car. You just saved me $3 million. If you stay here, the man who was trying to steal that money from me will come back to find this napkin, and he will kill you." Elena's blood ran cold. She looked back at the diner. Rick was staring out the window, mouth open. "Who are you?" she asked. The man smirked, a dark, handsome expression that made her knees weak despite the fear. "I'm Dominic Moretti. Now get in or get wet." Elena got in. The interior of the SUV smelled of leather and expensive scotch. The doors locked with a heavy thud that felt final. Elena sat squeezed against the door water, pooling around her feet. Dominic Moretti sat on the other side, typing furiously on a phone. "Lorenzo," Dominic said to the driver, not looking up. "Call the warehouse. Tell them to hold the shipment. If Marco has already signed the transfer, based on the old numbers, put a bullet in his hand, not his head. I want to talk to him." "Yes, boss," the driver, Lorenzo, replied. He was a mountain of a man with a scar running through his eyebrow. Elena swallowed hard. Bullet in his hand. What had she done? The car tore through the streets of Manhattan, ignoring red lights. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the underground garage of a glass skyscraper on Fifth Avenue, the Moretti Tower. They took a private elevator to the penthouse. The doors opened directly into a sprawling office that looked more like a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the rain-swept city. There was a mahogany desk the size of a small car, a fully stocked bar and art on the walls that Elena recognized from textbooks Real Kandinsky's Real Monets. "Sit," Dominic commanded, pointing to a leather chair in front of the desk. He walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked over and handed one to her. "Drink. You're shaking." Elena took the glass. It was crystal heavy. She took a sip. It burned, but it warmed her instantly. Dominic leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. The wetsuit jacket was gone, revealing a white dress shirt that clung to his muscular frame. He watched her. "So," he began, "a waitress at a dive diner in Brooklyn who understands international shipping tariffs and forensic auditing. Who are you really? A Fed police, a spy for the Russos?" "No," Elena exclaimed. "I'm nobody. I was a student. I was getting my master's at Columbia in forensic accounting. I had to drop out." "Why, family issues," Elena said quietly, looking down at her drink. "My dad got sick. Then he got in debt. Then he died. The debt didn't die with him." Dominic tilted his head. "Who holds the paper?" "Tony the Butcher Vercetti." Dominic let out a short, harsh laugh. "Tony. That low-rent shark. How much?" $50,000. Dominic walked around his desk and sat in his high-backed leather chair. He opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, wrote something and slid the paper across the mahogany surface. Elena leaned forward. It was a check made out to cash for $50,000. I can't take this," she stammered. "Consider it a consulting fee," Dominic said coolly. "You saved me $3 million tonight. That's a 1.6% commission. Standard rate." Elena stared at the check. It was freedom. It was her life back. "But," Dominic continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming softer but more dangerous, "I don't just want to pay you off, Elena. I have a problem. That napkin proved it. My current accountant, Marco, he's either incompetent or he's a thief. Tonight you proved he's a thief. I need someone who can see the numbers the way I do. Maybe better than I do." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he ruled. "I'm offering you a job, personal auditor to the Moretti family. You'll live here. You'll work directly for me. You will go through every ledger, every shell company, every offshore account I have. You find the leaks. You find the rats." Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. "And if I say no?" Dominic turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "Then you take the check you pay Tony, and you go back to pouring coffee. But Tony is a greedy man. Once he knows you have money, he'll find a reason to want more. And I won't be there to stop the car next time." It wasn't a threat from him. It was a statement of fact. "What's the salary?" Elena asked, surprised by her own boldness. Dominic smiled. It was the first time she had seen a genuine smile on his face. It transformed him from a monster into something devastatingly attractive. $20,000 a month, plus room and board, and full protection. Elena looked at the check, then at the man who could order someone shot in the hand over a phone call. She thought about the diner, the smell of grease, the fear of Tony Vercetti. "When do I start?" "Right now," Dominic said. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Lorenzo, bring Marco up here, and bring the plastic sheets." Elena froze. Plastic sheets. Dominic walked over to her, reaching out to gently tuck a strand of wet hair behind her ear. His fingers were hot against her cold skin, The touch sent a jolt of electricity down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "The first lesson of this business, Eleanor," he whispered, his lips inches from hers. "We don't fix mistakes with an eraser. We fix them with examples. Welcome to the family." As the elevator chimed, signaling the arrival of the traitorous accountant, Elena realized she hadn't just walked into a job. She had walked into the lion's den, and the lion was hungry. The morning sun hit the penthouse windows with a brilliance that felt offensive. Elena woke up in a bed that was larger than her entire apartment in Queens. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, with a thread count so high they felt like liquid against her skin. For a hazy moment, she thought she was still dreaming until the memories of the previous night came crashing back like a tidal wave. The rain, the math, the gun, the plastic sheets. She sat up, gasping. She checked her hands. No blood. She was alive. There was a polite knock on the door. An older woman with steel-grey hair and a terrifyingly crisp uniform entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Vance," the woman said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I am Martha. Mr. Moretti requested you eat before you begin. He has left clothes for you in the dressing room. Your previous attire has been incinerated." "Incinerated?" Elena squeaked. "Standard protocol," Martha said, setting down a plate of eggs, Benedict, and a mimosa. "Mr. Moretti expects you in the study in 1 hour. He said to tell you the numbers won't crunch themselves." Elena ate quickly, the food tasting like ash in her dry mouth. She found the dressing room. It was filled with designer clothes, pencil skirts, silk blouses, blazers that screamed power. She chose a simple black dress that fit her curves modest, but perfectly, and a pair of heels that looked like weapons. When she walked into the main office, the room was pristine. The air smelled of lemon polish and sandalwood. There was absolutely no sign that a man named Marco had been dragged away screaming just hours prior. The mahogany desk was clear, save for a massive stack of leather-bound ledgers and a high-end laptop. Dominic was there, standing by the window, talking on the phone in rapid-fire Italian. He turned as she entered. He was wearing a navy suit today. The jacket unbuttoned his tie loose. He looked tired, but the intensity in his eyes hadn't dimmed. He hung up the phone and looked her over. His gaze lingered for a fraction of a second too long on the curve of her waist before snapping back to her face. "You clean up well, Elena," he said, his voice rough. "I try," she replied, fighting the urge to cross her arms defensively. "Where do I start?" "Everywhere." Dominic gestured to the pile. "Marco was cooking the books, I know that. But I don't know how deep the rot goes. I have businesses in construction, shipping, waste management, and private lending. I need to know how much is real and how much is smoke." Elena sat at the desk. She opened the first ledger. It was for a concrete supply company in Jersey. She ran her fingers down the columns. To anyone else, it was just ink on paper. To her, it was a narrative. "I need access to the bank transaction histories," she said, her voice turning professional. "And the digital invoices." "You have full clearance," Dominic said, leaning over her shoulder to type a password into the laptop. He was close enough that she could smell him expensive soap tobacco and something distinctly masculine. Her breath hitched. "Don't make me regret giving you the keys to the kingdom, Eleanor," he whispered near her ear. For the next 6 hours, Eleanor vanished into the work. She was a surgeon, and the spreadsheets were her patient. She cross-referenced shipping manifests with fuel receipts. She compared payroll data with union dues. By 2:00 p.m., she found it. It wasn't just Marco. Marco was sloppy. He was skimming off the top. This was different. This was elegant. "Dominic," she called out. He had been sitting on a leather sofa in the corner, reviewing blueprints. He stood up immediately and walked over. "What is it?" "Marco was stealing peanuts," Elena said, pointing to the screen. "He was taking about 50 grand a month. But look here." She highlighted a series of recurring payments labeled consulting fees to a firm called Obsidian Holdings. These payments happen every third Friday. They vary in amount, so they look random. But they always equal exactly 4.5% of your net gross from the shipping docks. Dominic frowned. "I don't have a contract with an Obsidian Holdings." "I know," Elena said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Because Obsidian Holdings doesn't exist. I just ran a check. It's a shell company registered in the Caymans. But here's the kicker. The routing number for the deposits. It bounces through 3 banks, but lands in an account in Manhattan." "Whose account?" Dominic's voice was like ice. "It's a blind trust," Elena said. "But I traced the IP address used to access the account online. It was accessed yesterday, from inside this building." The silence in the room was deafening. Dominic stared at the screen, his jaw clenching so hard, a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Inside this building," he repeated softly. "Specifically," Elena hesitated, fearing the answer. "From the Wi-Fi network on the 40th floor. Isn't that where your lieutenants stay?" Dominic slammed his fist onto the desk, making Elena jump. "Yes, that's where my capos have their offices." He turned away, pacing like a caged tiger. Marco was a distraction. Someone close to me, one of my top men, is bleeding me dry. 4.5% constitutes millions over the last year. He stopped pacing and looked at her. The look in his eyes had changed. It was no longer just assessment. It was respect. And something else. Hunger. "You're good," he said. "Scary good." "I like puzzles," she said weakly. "This isn't a puzzle anymore, Elena. It's a war." He walked back to her, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Tonight is the annual gala for the Italian-American Heritage Foundation. Every major player in the city will be there, including the man I suspect is funding this sabotage. And now, you're coming with me." "Me to a gala?" Elena widened her eyes. "I'm an auditor, Dominic, not a mole." "Tonight you're not an auditor," Dominic said, his thumb grazing her lower lip, sending a shock wave through her body. "Tonight, you're my fiancé." Fiancé. It's the perfect cover. No one looks at the fiancé's math skills. They look at the ring. And while they're looking at you, you're going to help me figure out which one of my capos shakes hands with the wrong people. He stood up abruptly. "Get ready. The stylist will be here in 20 minutes. Make yourself breathtaking, Elena. My life depends on it." The dress was a weapon of mass destruction. It was emerald green silk, backless with a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh. It hugged every curve of her body like a second skin. The stylist had pinned her hair up in an intricate chignon, leaving a few tendrils loose to frame her face, and painted her lips a deep blood red. When Elena walked out into the living room, Dominic stopped dead in his tracks. He was adjusting his cufflinks, wearing a tuxedo that fit him with military precision. He slowly lowered his hands. "Dio mio," he whispered. He walked over to her, his eyes devouring her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside sat a diamond ring the size of a quail egg. "Give me your hand," he commanded. Elena extended her trembling hand. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy, cold. "Remember," He said, his voice low and intimate. "We are in love. You adore me. You can't keep your hands off me. Can you handle that?" Elena looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I think I can manage." "Good." He offered her his arm. "Let's go catch a rat." The gala was held at the Pierre Hotel. It was a sea of diamonds, black ties, and fake smiles. As they entered the ballroom, the conversation noticeably dipped. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Dominic Moretti was here, and he had a woman on his arm. "Smile," Dominic murmured through his teeth, pulling her closer to his side. "The man in the grey suit at 2 o'clock. That's Luca. My second in command. Watch him." Elena scanned the room. She saw Luca, a thick-necked man with a scar on his chin. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. "He looks nervous," Elena whispered, leaning her head on Dominic's shoulder lovingly. "He should be." They moved through the crowd. Dominic introduced her simply as, "Elena, my future." The men looked at her with envy, the women with jealousy. But Elena wasn't looking at the jewelry or the champagne. She was watching the dynamics. Who looked away when Dominic approached? Who held eye contact too long? Then she saw him. Across the room, standing by a pillar, was a man who looked like the darker, twisted reflection of Dominic. He was older, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his shark-like eyes. "Who is that?" Elena asked, tightening her grip on Dominic's arm. Dominic stiffened. "Salvatore Russo, the head of the Russo family. My enemy." Russo saw them. He raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast and began to walk toward them. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Dominic," Russo purred, his voice like gravel. "And who is this lovely creature I didn't know you had a heart to give away?" "Elena, this is Salvatore," Dominic said, his voice flat. "He was just leaving." "Nonsense." Russo smiled, stepping too close to Elena. He took her hand and kissed the air above it. "Enchanted. That is a magnificent ring. A heavy burden for such a delicate hand." Elena looked at Russo. Up close, she saw something. He was wearing a signet ring. It was black onyx. Carved into the stone was a geometric shape, a hexagon. Elena's mind flashed back to the digital invoices she had spent hours staring at. The logo for Obsidian Holdings wasn't a word. It was a small graphic in the header, a black hexagon. Her breath hitched. She looked at Dominic, then back at Russo. "It's a lovely ring," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Just like yours, Mr. Russo, although I prefer transparent dealings to opaque ones, like Obsidian." The smile vanished from Russo's face instantly. His eyes narrowed into slits. Dominic felt the shift. He didn't know exactly what she meant, but he knew she had struck a nerve. He pulled her back. "Enjoy the party, Sal," Dominic said. He steered Elena onto the dance floor. The orchestra began to play a waltz. Dominic pulled her flush against his body, his hand firm on the small of her back. "What did you just say to him?" Dominic demanded, in a whisper, spinning her around. "His ring!" Elena gasped, struggling to keep up with his powerful movements. "It's the logo for the shell company, the hexagon. Obsidian. Russo is the one draining your accounts, but he can't do it alone. He needs someone with your authorization codes." Dominic's eyes scanned the room over her shoulder. "Luca." "Is Luca wearing an earpiece?" Elena asked. "Yes. Why?" "Because Russo just tapped his left ear and nodded at Luca." Dominic stopped dancing. They were in the middle of the floor, surrounded by couples. but he looked ready to kill. "We need to leave. Now!" "Wait," Elena said. "If we leave, they know we know. We have to play it out." "Elena, you don't understand. If Russo knows you made the connection, you are a liability. He will try to." Suddenly, a waiter bumped into them. "So sorry, sir, madame." The waiter moved away quickly. Too quickly. Dominic looked down. He reached into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out a folded napkin. It wasn't his. He unfolded it. Inside was a single bullet, and a note scrawled in red ink. The waitress should have stayed at the diner. Dominic's face went pale. He grabbed Elena's hand, his grip bruising. "They know who you are," he snarled. "Dominic, look out!" Elena screamed. She saw the glint of metal from the balcony above. Not a camera, a barrel. Dominic reacted with supernatural speed. He tackled Elena, throwing her to the polished marble floor and covering her body with his own, just as the chandelier above them shattered. Bang! The ballroom erupted into chaos. Screams. Glass flying. Dominic scrambled up, hauling Elena with him. He pulled a gun from a holster beneath his jacket. She hadn't even known it was there. "Run!" he roared, pushing her toward the kitchen doors. "Don't look back." But Elena looked back. She saw Luca standing amidst the screaming crowd. He wasn't running. He was watching them, a sorrowful look on his face, his hand inside his jacket. Dominic fired 2 shots into the ceiling to clear the path. They burst into the hotel kitchen, pots and pans clattering as staff dove for cover. "The back exit!" Dominic shouted. They burst out into the alleyway. The rain had started again, soaking Elena's green silk dress instantly. "Lorenzo!" Dominic yelled into his phone. "Alley, now!" Black tires screeched around the corner. The SUV drifted to a halt. The back door flew open. They dove inside just as bullets sparked against the brick wall where their heads had been a second ago. "Go, go, go!" Dominic screamed. As the car sped away, fishtailing on the wet asphalt, Elena sat shivering, the adrenaline crashing. Dominic looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. He didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her wet hair. He held her so tight she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered roughly against her neck. "I'm so sorry. I dragged you into this." Elena pulled back, grabbing his face with both hands. "Dominic, Luca didn't shoot." "What? In the ballroom. Luca had a clear shot at us. He didn't take it. He looked sad." Dominic's eyes hardened. "Sadness doesn't absolve treason." "No," Elena said, her mind racing. "It means he's being blackmailed. Russo has something on him. If we find out what it is, we can turn him. We can use Luca to destroy Russo." Dominic stared at her. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto his forehead. He looked at this waitress, this civilian who had just been shot at, and was already plotting a counter-offensive. "You really are insane," he murmured, a mix of awe and disbelief in his voice. "I'm a mathematician, Dominic," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I just want to balance the equation. Russo subtracted from us. Now we divide him." Dominic leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hard, desperate, and tasted of rain and danger. It was a promise of violence against the world and possession of her. When he pulled away, his eyes were burning. "Lorenzo," Dominic commanded, "take us to the safe house in the Hamptons. We're going to war." The safe house wasn't a cabin in the woods. It was a brutalist masterpiece of concrete and glass perched on a cliff edge in East Hampton, overlooking a raging Atlantic Ocean. The storm had followed them from the city, battering the floor-to-ceiling windows with sheets of grey rain. They stumbled inside Lorenzo, staying outside to secure the perimeter with the rest of the guard detail. The moment the heavy steel door clicked shut, the silence was overwhelming. Dominic leaned heavily against the kitchen island, his face pale. "You're hurt," Elena said, her voice rising in panic. She saw the dark stain spreading on the white shirt of his tuxedo just above his hip. "It's a graze," Dominic gritted out, clutching his side. "Debris from the chandelier or a ricochet. It doesn't matter. It matters to me," Eleanor snapped. She scanned the kitchen. "Where is the first aid kit?" "Master bathroom, under the sink." Eleanor ran. She returned moments later with a tactical medical box. She forced Dominic to sit on a bar stool. With trembling hands, she unbuttoned his shirt. The wound was ugly, a jagged tear in his skin, oozing blood. But it wasn't deep. Still seeing his mortality up close shook her. This was the man who made millions tremble, yet his skin tore just like anyone else's. "This is going to sting," she warned, uncapping a bottle of antiseptic. Dominic didn't flinch as she cleaned the wound. He just watched her face. His eyes were heavy-hooded with exhaustion and something darker desire, mixed with pain. "Why didn't you run?" he asked quietly. "In the alley. You could have run into the crowd, disappeared. I wouldn't have chased you." Elena paused, holding a gauze pad to his side. She looked up, locking eyes with him. "Because the numbers didn't add up," she whispered. "What numbers?" "The probability of me surviving without you is 0. And the probability of me wanting to survive without you is getting lower every day." Dominic's breath hitched. He reached out his hand, cupping the back of her neck, pulling her forehead to rest against his. "You are dangerous, Elena, more dangerous than Russo. He attacks my empire. You attack my sanity." He kissed her, then not like the desperate kiss in the car, but slow, deep, and possessive. It was a claiming. Eleanor melted into him, careful of his wound, her hands tangling in his damp hair. For a moment, the war, the traitor, and the bullets didn't exist. There was only the heat of his skin and the sound of the ocean crashing below. But the moment broke when Dominic's phone buzzed on the counter. He pulled back, his eyes clearing. He picked up the phone. "Report," he barked. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Keep him alive. If he tries to run, shoot his legs. Bring him here." He hung up. "Lorenzo found Luca?" Elena asked, taping the gauze in place. "Luca is coming to us," Dominic said, buttoning a fresh shirt he had grabbed from a duffel bag. "He thinks he's coming to finish the job. He thinks we're vulnerable here. He's coming to kill you. He has to." Dominic walked to the massive window, looking out at the darkness. If Russo has leverage on him, Luca has no choice. It's him or me. "No," Elena said, her mind shifting back to auditor mode. She grabbed her laptop from her bag. "It's not him or you. It's money. It's always money. Elena, this is blood feuds, not accounting. Everything is accounting, Dominic. Leverage is just a debt someone can't pay." She sat at the dining table and flipped her laptop open. "Give me Luca's full name and social security number." "Why?" "Because if I can find where his money is going, I can find out who owns him." Dominic hesitated, then rattled off the information. Elena's fingers flew across the keys. She bypassed standard firewalls, utilizing a back door she had discovered in the Moretti servers earlier that day. She pulled up Luca's personal finances. Clean, she muttered. Too clean. No gambling debts, no mistresses. He lives below his means. See, Dominic said. It's not money. Wait. Elena squinted. Look at the deductions. Every month there's a compassionate care transfer. It's routed to a medical facility in Zurich, the Edelweiss Institute. She hacked into the clinic's patient portal, a felony that would have terrified her yesterday, but today felt like a necessary errand. Got it, she breathed. Dominic walked over, looking at the screen. Payment for patient Sophia Rossi. Elena read. Treatment for acute leukemia. Experimental gene therapy. Dominic went still. Sophia. That's Luca's daughter. She was supposed to have died 3 years ago. She didn't die, Elena said, her voice thick with realization. Russo must have found out she was sick. He moved her to a private facility in Switzerland. He's paying for the treatment that keeps her alive. That's the leverage. If Luca doesn't betray you, Russo pulls the plug, literally. Dominic stared at the screen. The fury in his eyes was replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. He's not a traitor, Dominic whispered. He's a father. We can use this, Elena said, standing up. We don't kill Luca. We save his daughter. If we take over the payments, if we secure her safety. Luca turns. And then? Dominic asked, looking at her with a terrifying grin. And then? Elena smiled back, a shark's smile. We use Luca to feed Russo the wrong numbers. We let Russo think he's won right up until the moment he chokes on it. Headlights swept across the glass walls. Tires crunched on gravel. He's here, Dominic said. He pulled his gun, checking the chamber. Stay behind me. If this goes wrong, you run to the beach. It won't go wrong, Elena said, because I did the math. The front door opened. The wind howled into the room, bringing the smell of rain and ozone. Luca walked in. He was alone. His hands were empty, held out to his sides. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, broken, grey-faced, his eyes dead. Lorenzo stood behind him, gun pressed to the back of Luca's head. Boss? Lorenzo grunted. Found him on the perimeter. He surrendered. Dominic stood in the center of the room, looking like a vengeful god in the dim light. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scream. Give me one reason why I shouldn't paint this room with your brains, Luca! Luca fell to his knees. He didn't beg. He just looked down at the floor. Do it, Dom, Luca croaked. Please, just make it quick. I can't do it anymore. Dominic stepped forward, the gun hanging loosely by his side. You missed in the ballroom. I aimed high, Luca whispered. I couldn't kill you. I tried, but I couldn't. Russo will kill you for missing. Russo is going to kill me anyway. And then he's going to kill Sophia. Luca's voice cracked on the name, a sob tearing through his chest. Sophia is in Zurich. Elena's voice cut through the tension. Luca's head snapped up. He looked at Elena, then at Dominic. Terror, pure and white-hot, filled his face. How do you know? We know everything, Dominic said smoothly. He signaled Lorenzo to lower the gun. We know Russo is paying the bills. We know she's responding well to the gene therapy. And we know that yesterday Russo threatened to stop the treatment if you didn't put a bullet in me at the gala. Luca slumped, covering his face with his hands. He has men at the hospital. If I don't check in, if he thinks I flipped, she dies. Dominic walked over to his fallen friend. He crouched down, forcing Luca to look him in the eye. Lorenzo, Dominic called out without looking away. Call the Swiss team. Get to the Edelweiss Institute. Secure the girl. Kill anyone standing guard who isn't on our payroll." "On it," Lorenzo said, stepping out to the patio. Luca stared at Dominic, tears streaming down his face. "Dom, you'd do that, after what I did. Your family." "Luca, family does stupid things when they're scared. But now you're going to fix it." Dominic stood up and pulled Luca to his feet. He dusted off Luca's shoulders. "Russo thinks I'm hiding. He thinks I'm weak. We're going to prove him right." "What?" Luca wiped his eyes. Elena stepped forward. "We need Russo to believe his plan worked. You're going to call him. Tell him Dominic is wounded. Tell him the accounts are locked, but tell him you have the physical master ledger." "The master ledger?" Luca frowned. "That doesn't exist. It's all digital." "It exists now," Elena said, lifting a heavy black leather book from the table. She had spent the last hour filling the first 10 pages with intricate, plausible, and utterly fabricated data. "This book," Elena patted the cover, "contains the access codes to Dominic's offshore billions, or so Russo will think. But the codes in here don't lead to the money. They lead to a logic bomb I programmed. As soon as he enters them into his system to initiate the transfer, it will reverse trace his entire network. It will drain him." Dominic finished, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It will transfer every cent Russo has into a holding account under your name, Elena. And simultaneously, it will send his entire encrypted criminal history to the FBI." "The perfect trap," Luca breathed. "But he won't just take the book. He'll want a meeting. He'll want to gloat." "Exactly," Dominic said. "He'll want to see me bleed, so invite him." "Where?" Dominic looked at Elena. "Where did this all start?" Elena smiled. "Sal's 24-hour diner." "Set the meat," Dominic ordered Luca. "Tomorrow night, 3:30 a.m., the graveyard shift. Tell him I'm dying and I want to trade the book for my life." Luca nodded, his spine straightening. The traitor was gone. The soldier was back. "I'll make the call." As Luca walked away to make the most dangerous phone call of his life, Dominic turned to Eleanor. "You realize," he said softly, "that if this works, you'll be the richest woman in New York. You could leave. You'd never have to work again." Elena walked up to him, placing her hand over his heart. She could feel it beating, strong, steady, lethal. "I told you, Dominic, I'm not leaving until the math is right, and we still have a remainder to deal with." "After tomorrow," Dominic promised, leaning down to brush his lips against hers. "There will be no remainders. Only us." The storm outside raged on, but the real storm was coming tomorrow night at a greasy spoon diner in Brooklyn. The neon sign of Sal's 24-hour diner flickered against the relentless rain, just as it had 3 nights ago. Inside the diner was empty, save for Rick, the manager, who was currently shivering in the kitchen, paid $5,000 to stay hidden in the walk-in freezer for the next hour. Dominic sat in the same booth as before table 4, but this time he looked like a broken man. His skin was pale, thanks to a layer of theatrical powder, and he was slumped against the vinyl seat, clutching his side, where a bandage was visibly soaked in red dye. Elena sat next to him, the black leather ledger clutched to her chest. She looked terrified. It wasn't hard to act. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "He's late," Elena whispered, checking her watch. 3:03 a.m. "He's not late." Dominic murmured, his voice feigning weakness, but his eyes sharp as flint. "He's watching, checking for wires, checking for snipers." "Are there snipers?" "No, just us." and the math. Suddenly, the headlights of 3 SUVs flooded the diner, blinding them. Doors slammed. The bell above the diner door jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the 6 armed men who marched in. Salvatore Russo walked in last. He wore a camel hair coat and an expression of absolute triumph. He looked around the greasy diner, sneering. "How poetic," Russo said, his voice smooth. "The great Dominic Moretti ending where he ate." He laughed at his own joke. "You look terrible, Dom." Dominic coughed a wet, rattling sound. "You won, Sal. You won. Just let her go." Russo looked at Elena. "Ah, the waitress, the accountant, the fiancé. You've had a busy week, my dear." He snapped his fingers. "The book." Elena hugged the ledger tighter. You promise you won't kill us if I give it to you." "I am a businessman, Elena." Russo lied effortlessly. "I only want my due. Give me the access codes, and you can take your dying prince and leave the country." Elena looked at Dominic. He gave a barely perceptible nod. With shaking hands, she slid the heavy black book across the table. Russo grabbed it. He flipped it open. He saw pages of handwritten codes, account numbers, and routing keys. "It's biometric," Elena stammered. "You have to input the master key into your phone to initiate the transfer. It links to the Caymans." Russo pulled out his phone. He opened his banking app, a secure encrypted platform used by the underworld. He began typing the long string of numbers from the first page of the ledger. "Luca," Russo called out without looking up. Luca stepped forward from the group of guards. He looked at Dominic, his face unreadable. "Put a bullet in Dom's head the moment the transfer clears," Russo ordered casually. "I don't like loose ends." "No," Elena screamed, standing up. "You promised." "Sit down," one of the guards shouted, pointing a shotgun at her. Russo ignored her. He pressed the final key on his phone. "Execute transfer." The screen showed a loading bar. Spinning. Spinning. "It's done." Russo smiled. "Goodbye, Dominic." Ding! A notification popped up on Russo's phone. Then another. Then a cascade of them vibrating endlessly in his hand. Russo frowned. "What is this?" He looked at the screen. "Alert outgoing transfer initiated. Alert Zurich account drained. Alert Cayman holdings drained. Alert liquid assets transferring." "What?" Russo yelled. "Outgoing." "No, it's supposed to be incoming." He looked at the balance. It wasn't going up. It was dropping. Fast. 200 million. 50 million. 0. Error, insufficient funds. Then a new window popped up on his screen. It was a video file. It auto-played. It was a live feed from the lobby of the FBI headquarters. A printer was churning out paper. "What did you do?" Russo roared, throwing the phone onto the table. "Stop it! Stop it now!" Elena stood up. The fear was gone from her face. She smoothed her skirt and looked him dead in the eye. "You forgot the variable, Salvatore," she said, her voice cold and steady. "The code I gave you wasn't a deposit key. It was a mirror command. You didn't open Dominic's vault. You opened your own. And since your phone is connected to your primary server, my algorithm just vacuumed every penny you have and sent it to a charity account for, I believe it's the Police Widows and Orphans Fund." Russo's face turned purple. "Kill them!" he screamed to his men. "Kill them all!" The guards raised their weapons. Click! The sound of 6 firing pins hitting empty chambers echoed in the silent diner. The guards looked at their guns in confusion. They racked the slides. Nothing. Luca stepped forward, standing next to the booth. He pulled a handful of firing pins out of his pocket and dropped them onto the table with a clatter. "I took the liberty of cleaning the weapons while we drove over Boss," Luca said to Russo, his voice dripping with venom. "Gun safety is very important." Russo looked around, wild-eyed. He reached into his own coat for his personal revolver. Dominic moved. The dying man vanished. In a blur of motion, Dominic vaulted over the table. He kicked the gun out of Russo's hand, the bone snapping with a sickening crunch. Russo howled, falling to the floor. Dominic stood over him, perfectly healthy, radiating pure, unadulterated rage. He placed his boot on Russo's throat. "You went after my money," Dominic snarled. "I can forgive that. You tried to kill me. I expect that. But you threatened a child, and you tried to hurt her." Dominic applied pressure. Russo gagged. "Please," Russo wheezed. "I have money. Hidden accounts." "You have nothing," Elena said, stepping out of the booth. She picked up Russo's phone. "The file transfer to the FBI just finished. They have your location. I'd say you have about 3 minutes before the sirens start." Dominic leaned down. "I'm not going to kill you, Sal. That's too easy. You're going to rot in a federal cell broken, knowing that a waitress and a calculator took you down." He kicked Russo one last time, knocking him unconscious. "Lorenzo," Dominic barked. "Tie them up. Leave them for the feds. Let's go home." 6 months later, the terrace of the Villa Moretti in Lake Como was bathed in golden sunlight. The blue water sparkled below, competing with the brilliance of the diamond on Elena's finger. She sat at a patio table, a stack of papers in front of her. Not ledgers this time, wedding invitations. Dominic walked out onto the terrace, carrying 2 espressos. He placed one down and kissed the top of her head. "Stop working," he said gently. "We're retired. Mostly. I'm just checking the guest list." Elena smiled, leaning back into his touch. "Do you think we should invite Rick from the diner? He did stay in the freezer for an hour." "He's coming. I bought him a franchise. He's fine." Elena looked out at the view. It was a long way from Brooklyn, a long way from the debt and the fear. "Did you hear about Russo?" she asked. "Sentenced yesterday," Dominic said, sitting across from her. 3 consecutive life terms. His lawyer quit because the check bounced. Elena laughed. It was a free, happy sound. Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. "You know I never did get my change back that night." "What change?" "I gave you $100 for a $12 coffee. You owe me $87.50. Elena smirked. She picked up a pen and wrote a figure on a napkin. She slid it to him. It read, "Lifetime supply of love, +1 soul." "I think that covers the interest," she whispered. Dominic smiled the same dangerous, beautiful smile that had captivated her in the rain. "I'll accept the terms." He pulled her out of the chair and into his arms, kissing her as the sun set over the water, closing the ledger once and for all. "Now I have a question for you guys. In the story, Luca betrayed Dominic to save his daughter. Dominic forgave him. If you were the boss, would you have taken Luca back, or was the betrayal too deep? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed the Ledger of Hearts and want more stories of revenge, romance and instant karma, smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We have a wild revenge on a cheating ex story coming up next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and remember, check your receipts.